You're listening to School Counseling Simplified, a podcast with easy-to-implement strategies for busy school counselors. Here's your host, Rachel Davis from Bright Futures Counseling.
Hey listeners, let me let you in on a little secret. You don't have to stress about planning your class lessons, small groups, and individual sessions anymore. My school counseling membership program, Impact, is here to help. So, what do Impact members get? Monthly curriculum plans across all 3 tiers, SEL lessons, small groups, individual, and seasonal activities, step-by-step video implementation guides, bi-weekly Zoom coaching calls with me, and an exclusive Facebook group community. This membership is designed for school counselors who want to deliver the best possible content to their students, but who also want to just press the easy button. You'll get access to monthly curriculum plans, resources, support, and community so you can deliver quality, engaging, life-changing counseling lessons to your kiddos. So what do you think? Are you ready to make an impact? Join today at stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/impact. Hey guys, thank you for listening to another episode of School Counseling Simplified. So this month, I want to talk to you about individual counseling. I don't know about you, but when I first got started, individual counseling was so overwhelming. Like, I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. I felt like I was always doing it wrong. I don't know. I felt more comfortable in a group, I think because it was more structured and it just seemed more clear to me on what was supposed to be happening next. Whereas individual counseling was just like the wild, wild west out there. I did not feel prepared for it at all. Fortunately, over the years, through lots of trial and error, I've developed some systems and planning strategies that work super great for individual counseling, and that's why I want to share them here with you today. So, for this episode, I want to talk to you about what am I supposed to be doing during individual counseling sessions. So, I want to talk to you about step-by-step how you can plan out your individual counseling sessions so you can feel confident and prepared that you're making an impact and a difference. Okay, so first up, let's do the planning. Now, I think a lack of planning is my worst thing that ever happened with individual counseling. I would just not have a plan because I would be busy, right? You're doing class lessons, you're doing small groups, you're doing meetings, everything. And I'm like, oh, it's just a one-on-one, let's grab the kid and we'll talk. But then it's like, oh my gosh, I'm looking at the clock. How are we going to do 30 minutes of this? What are we going to do? I don't have anything prepared. So while planning, if you're like me, well, I was going to say I'm not a planner, but I am a planner in my personal life. I'm like a super planner. I read a menu before I go to a restaurant. Maybe that's because I'm kind of a foodie too. But I love planning a vacation. I'll do a detailed itinerary for a vacation. But when it comes to like work things, I don't know. Sometimes I'm more fly by the seat of my pants. But again, I think it's the nature of the job. It's not that we don't want to be planners. It just gets kind of crazy out there, right? I'm sure you can relate. So it seemed like a lot for me as a counselor to sit down and plan out outlines for individual sessions. That just seemed like something that I did not have time for. But I'm encouraging you to do it because the more you plan in advance, you will save time tenfold later on. So an outline doesn't have to be overwhelming. It's basically just a series of events so you can know what you're, expected to do next and kind of keep track of things. But first you may be thinking, well, what am I even supposed to be doing in these sessions? And that's where you want to come up with some objectives. So this child was likely referred to you for something. So maybe their parent or teacher referred them because they're having self-control issues and they would like them to learn some more self-control strategies. So you're thinking, okay, I'm going to see Grant 2 times a week to work on self-control. But then that's it. That's where you stop. That's as far as I would get at least. So that's why I started thinking of objectives. So then you want to come up with an objective for each session. So let's say you're going to see Grant for 6 sessions. So you need to think, okay, what do I want to do in session 1? What is my goal? What do I want to accomplish in session 2? What is my goal? So perhaps your session 1 objective is just to, build rapport and find out a little more about the student. Perhaps in session 2, you want to, discuss times when they feel out of control. Perhaps in session 3, you want to discuss possible coping strategies. Maybe in session 4, you do more coping strategies to really reinforce those. Maybe session 5, you talk about a support system that they have. that they can go to when they're feeling out of control. And maybe in finally session 6, you'll kind of review everything, set goals for the future of what they can do independently now that their time with you is coming to an end. So that was just off the top of my head, but some examples of some general objectives that you can do. Now, you can dig deeper with these. I encourage you, meet with parents, meet with teachers, especially if that's who referred them. So it would be great to get everyone together, but I do know that's difficult. But if you can at least meet with the person who made the referral and find out, okay, what are we really working on here? What is the overall goal we're trying to achieve? And then once you have that overall goal, you'll break it down into the number of sessions with those little micro goals. Think of it kind of like an IEP, right? So special ed does this all the time. They're meeting, and their meetings are intense. I've been in them, but they definitely have a goal, right? That's what the kids are working toward. They have a different set of goals, and then they're measuring the goals and tracking progress. So think about it that way. How can you sit with parents and teachers, establish a goal for the counseling services, and then you can, track the progress. Did the student meet this goal or not? We're going to talk more about how to track that progress later on this month. But the reason we even want to set goals in the first place is for two main things. Number one is for the student's progress, right? The whole reason they're seeing you is to progress or improve in some area that they're struggling with. And if we don't have a clear goal, it can be difficult for them to make that improvement or transformation. And the second thing is to advocate for your role, right? We don't want the parent or the teacher to think, oh, I refer them to counseling and I guess she sees them. I'm not really sure what they're doing in there. That's the last thing we want. The more clarity we can bring around our role, the more appreciation and understanding we will get. So I encourage you in the individual counseling sessions to communicate with teachers and parents. I know it's hard to do throughout the whole sessions because you have lots of students, but at least at the beginning, sit down, even virtually or through email, make some goals, and then you'll have something to work off of. Now, I do like to keep my outlines and my objectives ASCA aligned. So ASCA, or the American School Counselor Association, go to their website. They have a resource called the Mindsets and Behaviors, and those are like their standards that they measure everything off of. So I like to select at least one standard to complement the objective that I'm doing for that session. So the reason that's so important is that we want to make sure that our counseling program is aligned to the ASCA model, and just, to keep us in check that we're doing the right thing. So it's a quick and easy way. You cross-reference their standards with your objectives, select some, and this way you can ensure that you're following the model. Okay, so that's the outline, kind of the boring part, right? This is the planning ahead of time. But hopefully after you sit down, and I encourage you to batch this work, like sit down, write out the 6-session plan, or it sounds like I'm saying Succession, which I think is a show on HBO my husband was watching last night. 6-session plan or 8-session plan. So once you write those out, then you're ready to go. Like, I hope you're already feeling relieved. Like, you have your outline, you're good to go. Obviously, you can tweak and modify as needed, but at least you have an objective and a goal defined and ready to go, so you know what you're working toward each session. Okay, so that's step one. And you're probably thinking, okay, well, I know what I'm working toward, but what am I actually doing with the student in these sessions? Oh, and I forgot to mention, especially if you have older kiddos, you can even talk to them about their goals for why they're in counseling. If they're a self-referral, you absolutely want to do this. But even if someone else referred to them, you can ask them like, so what are your goals? Why are you here? What do you want to work on? What do you want to get out of these sessions together? So definitely check in with the student as well. But like I said, that's step one, getting your outlines. So you have a clear vision for what you're aiming for, but how are you going to get there? This is where you're going to come up with the core content that you're going to cover in each of your sessions. So this is the order of events or the steps, the processes that you're going to take during each session to help them reach their goal. So I like to break it down into 3 areas: icebreaker, activity, and journals. So first up, an icebreaker. Now with my groups, I do an icebreaker every single session because I think it's really fun and helpful in the group setting. However, with individuals, it's not always necessary to do an icebreaker. I encourage you to do it in the first session because you're trying to build rapport, and you may not have a lot of deep work you're working on during the first session because you're just, getting comfortable and introducing a concept to them. So I definitely recommend doing an icebreaker in the first session, but if you want to do them throughout, like a quick little warm-up activity, I think that's great. You could do it 2 ways. You can do one that's completely random, but just to build rapport and get the kiddo comfortable before you dig deeper. So that would be something like you could do like a little dance party break or some kind of challenge, or maybe a little mini scavenger hunt or an acting opportunity. I don't know, something fun just to kind of break the ice. Clearly, that's the name, right? Icebreaker. Or if you want to be a little extra, you can select icebreakers that complement what you'll be working on that week. So for example, if you're going to be discussing coping strategies with your student, then your icebreaker can be related to coping strategies. So maybe it's a scavenger hunt where they're looking around the room for different coping strategies. And then during the session, you sit down and you're actually looking at the coping strategies deeper and how they can apply them to their everyday life. So up to you. You can do icebreakers. I guess it's like a scale of difficulty here. The easiest thing to do is just do an icebreaker in session 1, some get to know you game or activity or something, or maybe like an interactive notebook or something you're doing during that first session to really get to know them. So first session only, that's option 1. If you want to work a little harder, you can do icebreakers of any topic throughout every session. Or if you want to be like the most extreme, you can do topic-related icebreakers at the beginning of each session. So pick you, do what works best for you, do a mix, whatever you want to do. With individuals, I usually stick to first session only. Also because you may find that you don't have a lot of time, given that you're going to do an activity and a journal as well. So for the activities, now this is the core of your lesson, right? This is when you're trying to achieve that objective or that goal through an activity. So if, let's use the coping strategies example, if you're trying to teach a student coping strategies, this is where you're thinking, okay, what activity can I do to teach coping strategies? Well, this can be something physical. Maybe they're acting out coping strategies charades and you're trying to guess them. Or you can do a social story where they read a story. You can type up like a fake little story about a student, try to make it relatable, like a relatable character to your student. But they can read the story about the student and then do a discussion dice afterwards where you're discussing what the student did, what they could do differently. Did they relate to that student? What's a coping strategy that student could have tried? Something like that. Those are really fun and really get the kids thinking. Also, you could do a board game. So I love board games. They do take a little bit of prep work, like you're going to have to make a game board and stuff, but I'm sure you can find some simple templates online, and I have a lot of board games in my TPT store as well if you just want a simple grab and go one. But like for example, I love to do a coping skills board game where you can have, they draw a card depending on what space they land on, and then when they get there, they look at the card and it'll have a different coping skill, and then they get to say, do they want to try this coping skill? Yes, maybe, or no. If they say yes, they're going to try it, they can move forward 2 spaces, maybe 1 space, or no, stay where you are. Something like that. They might get the hang of it and just start saying yes to all of them, but you get the point. And of course, with everything we do, even these fun, silly games, we want to dig deeper. So you want to talk about that coping strategy. Don't just play the game. Say like, have you used it before? Did you think it'll work for you? Why or why not? What have you done instead when you felt this way? Why do you think this would be better? Something like that. Another thing you can do is give examples on a board game of like hypothetical kids and how they're reacting. So if they land on a certain space, they draw a card that says, oh, Angie was angry and she ripped up her paper, and then they move back. Or if they, land on a card that says Angie was angry and she talk to her counselor, then they move forward. So you can kind of make the game like that, where based on how the character's acting, they're moving different ways. And then you can just have some share cards where if they land on a certain space, they have to share. And just for sharing, they obviously get to move forward. So those are some fun ways that you can make your own board games as well. And you can do crafts. So think about, you can do like cut and paste paper crafts. You can get out some yarn. For example, you could have them make a craft with different yarn, different colors representing coping strategies they want to try. And then, you can have one for at home, one for school, one for when they're out and about in the community. And you can compare the different colors of the yarn. So maybe they're wrapping them around like popsicle sticks. And then you're saying, oh, look, this popsicle stick for school is different colors than the home one. Why would you use these coping strategies at home versus at school? So these are great for, tactile kiddos. Sometimes it's just more fun than straight up discussion cards, right? The whole point is to have that discussion and to dig deeper, but they're getting to physically do something. So I hope those ideas helped you with activities that you can do. Okay, so we've talked about your outline that you're going to start with. Then you're going to identify if you're using icebreakers. Next up, select and create some activities to use. And then lastly, your journals. So I love using journals. Allow like 5 to maybe even 10 minutes at the end. Give the kids some time to really reflect, turn on some music, and then maybe you can start working on something else to give them some space to process. And I do journal prompts because an open-ended journal can be overwhelming for them. So I have a prompt, like talk about a time where you didn't use a coping strategy and you wished you would have, or what's something you gathered from today's session, and have them reflect on those. You can then, read them and discuss right then, or you can save them for later. I've even had students who will want me to read it, but they don't want to talk about it, kind of thing. So find out their preference, but that self-reflection piece is really critical. Now with the younger guys, it may be easier to have a visual type journal. So for example, I'm thinking of an anger management one that I have that's a picture of a bonfire, and at the bottom it has coals, and on the coals they're writing things that are triggers for them that make them feel angry. So then they're just writing a few words, right? They're not having to write paragraphs. So you can definitely adapt the journals to fit the age and developmental needs of the student that you're working with. Okay guys, I hope you found that helpful. I love individual sessions now that I have these strategies in place, and I hope you feel encouraged to do them as well. If you haven't seen it already, I just released a brand new individual curriculum. I was kind of putting out pieces here and there over the last couple months, but the complete bundle is finally here. So it's 11 resources, covers topics like anxiety, anger management, self-regulation, trauma, grief, divorce, growth mindset, self-control. I'm sure I'm missing some. There's 11. But I think you're going to love it. Inside, it's like a 6-piece set, so you get some general individual counseling best practices, kind of like we've talked about here. Anything from intake and referral all the way to how to transition and graduate a student. I also include my feelings check posters. There's a counselor's guide with some objectives and supplemental resources and videos you can go check out. I include the actual activities themselves, so these things that you heard me talking about, the board games, the crafts, all of that, it's all in there, deep breathing activities, things like that. And then there are the journals as well. So you get, 5 activities and 5 journals per topic. And lastly, I include data tools because we're going to dive deeper in this in a few episodes, but you're going to find how helpful these data tools are having these templates. So it's things like a behavior survey you can send to parents and teachers, self-assessments you can do with the kiddos, and student rating scales that the students can do each time they meet with you. So those are some cool things. Like I said, I'll talk more about how to use those things and how you can even make your own. But if you're interested in the templates, or you'd rather just have a complete curriculum because you heard of this episode, maybe you felt inspired, but you're like, oh gosh, I don't have time to do all this, then I've got you covered with that new curriculum. So the link's in the show notes, or send me a message if you want to check it out. And I will talk to you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to School Counseling Simplified. You can find the links from today's episode in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with Rachel, she's on Instagram and Teachers Pay Teachers at Bright Futures Counseling. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes of School Counseling Simplified. Talk to you next week.